Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL.
Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host Greg Thompson along with my partner in crime Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how we doing?
Doing all right, man. You know, one thing, Greg, we weren't even talking about this offline, but it's Super Bowl week, and I can't remember a time that I've ever been less excited for the Super Bowl. Like it'll be on at the house. I might make some fun food just for a last chance to make some fun food this year, but nah, I have no excitement about this, man. Is it just the sting of that Bills loss that's turned me off of football for now, or what? How are you feeling?
It is. It is. I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I will watch the Super Bowl, of course.
Yeah.
I'll watch the whole thing. I'll watch the halftime show because it's like our childhood at the halftime show. I'll watch the commercials I always have fun with. I'll do the whole deal.
Sure.
We're not doing a Super Bowl party. We're not doing any fun stuff. I'll probably make something fun to eat.
You can drive to New York and make some prop bets and then drive back? Or
I really wish I could. I don't. It is weird. Like I'm so disconnected and still so frustrated in, that seeing the potential. And we're going to talk about some things tonight as we, close out the season with some of our final thoughts, for our season wrap up and a couple other. We'll talk about some of the news and the hires that have been made here this week. But yeah, ultimately it is still just a constant little reminder or poke of like, oh yeah, other teams are still playing who I honestly don't think are better than the Bills, and the Bills aren't, and that sucks. And it's just impossible not to go through that every single time.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have any rooting interest? You got anyone you're betting on this one? Or?
I do think I'm going to pick the Rams. I think the Rams are the better team. I've listened to a bunch of the savvy shows that I listen to, Warren Sharp and other people like that, and it's pretty consistent. Like everyone has said, listen, every single metric says it's to the Rams. Every single matchup, every single advanced stat, every single metric says you should be betting on the Rams. Except it feels weird to bet against Joe Burrow right now. And I'm just going to pick Joe Burrow because I'm tired of losing to Joe Burrow, and I keep picking against him and he keeps winning.
Right.
And I kind of respect that. Like, I get it.
Teams of destiny happen all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like,
I mean, the Elam Manning runs, the Joe Flacco runs, the guys get hot at the right time and go on a run. And, God bless them. That, no team that gets sacked 9 times in the game should be in the Super Bowl. Like, that should not happen. And they're still there. They're still finding a way to make this happen. And, the same thing. Their defense didn't all of a sudden get amazing against the Chiefs, but they made some clutch plays when it mattered. They stepped up and did what was needed, and they slayed the dragon. And it's weird to be in that spot. So I am going to pick the Rams. I don't think they're going to keep pulling rabbits out of hats, but hell, they've done it 3 times now. So who says they can't do it again?
Yeah, I'm torn because everything in me says it should be the Rams in those same ways that you're saying. And I want to see Matthew Stafford win one. I've always been a big Matt Stafford fan. I think he does things the right way. I think he's been given a hard time throughout his career. I like him a lot. I want to see him win one. But I also don't really like the Rams. Like LA sports, I hate just in general because their fans are just kind of fake LA fans. And then too, like the way the Rams have gone all in and pushed everything back. And I hate to see teams that build super teams or try to build super teams find success. Like I like to see teams build the correct way and then find success. So part of me doesn't want that to happen, but I do want to see it for Stafford. I would love to see that. And it's the biggest shame about this is no Robert Woods. I would have loved to seen Robert Woods
Yeah,
play
that's
in
a
a
good
Super
one. That's a
Bowl
good one.
and win a Super Bowl.
That definitely would have given me a little extra to push
Yeah.
for. Here, Cal saying here for the second year in a row, a team is at home for the Super Bowl. Super weird. Is this okay with you? Would you rather see the game move to a warm weather city? Yeah, if we moved it to Dallas or Miami, then they'd never have the.
I was going to say Dallas, definitely. Yeah,
that'd be great.
Well, and one thing we know is that will never happen to the Bills. No matter how nice of a stadium we build, the Super Bowl is never coming to Buffalo, so we'll never have a home Super Bowl.
I do think it's weird. I don't think it's appropriate that what is supposed to be the most neutral, objective, neutral site game for that reason, that it's possible that a team could play there. But ultimately, what are you going to do? Like, you have to use, unless you played everyone in like the Rose Bowl or like some college stadium, like you have to, like it has to be a possibility because you have to use an NFL stadium. And it's right that NFL owners want to host games. Like, it's good for the city, it's good for the stadium, like all those things are positive. So it is weird, but I don't really know a way around it. So with that said, obviously we're still going to watch the game, we're still going to enjoy it. I haven't watched all that much of the coverage. I won't lie there.
Me neither,
I haven't watched barely anything. As we switch over, before we get into our season wrap up, there are a couple of bits of news. So last week we talked about, obviously, the exciting retention of Ken Dorsey and him taking over the mantle of offensive coordinator and play caller for the Buffalo Bills. I would say, surprise hire of Joe Brady as quarterback coach. I don't think a lot of people anticipated that. For anybody who hasn't checked out the film room, Eric and Anthony did an awesome job breaking down some of the potential for everything that was out there on their playbooks and the styles. And we've had a couple additional ones here this week. So we'll start with the offensive line coach, a name that many are familiar with. Aaron Kromer is being brought back. He was the Bills offensive line coach during a couple of the Rex Ryan years in 15 and 16. Where they led the NFL in rushing, though both of those years. Obviously, as everyone in our mentions brought up, there was an incident off the field that most people associate to him.
I'm so sick of hearing about it, man.
Probably get a little overzealous defending his son, who is getting kind of roughed up over some beach chairs, but certainly not what it was. Ridiculous that was the first thing everyone brought up. He's also a really good offensive line coach and has done an awesome job as the offensive line coach and run game coordinator for the Rams. So after two awesome LaShawn McCoy seasons in Buffalo, went to LA, and Todd Gurley's, flourish was there because of him.
With one of the most innovative minds offensively in football who considered him for his staff. So that's another thing we should be excited for.
And not only hired him as an offensive line coach, saw what he did for a year, and then promoted him to run game coordinator. So Sean McVay saying, hey, I want you to design our run game. That matters. That kind of thing matters. So I don't know that he's not Dante Scarnecchia. He's not coming in as the greatest offensive line coach in history, but this is a net positive. I think that he's more well regarded around the NFL than Bobby Johnson. I don't know that it's a clear upgrade or something way, way better, but I think that people could argue that it's an improvement. And I think that what he did, if you go back and look at the talent on those Bills offensive lines in 15 to 16, it was not an all-star team. When he went to LA, it was not an all-star team of offensive linemen there. And what he produced was a consistently above average offense from a rushing standpoint. And I think now there's better talent on the Bills offensive line and by far the best passing game he's ever worked with as a running game coordinator. So I'm intrigued by him. What are your first thoughts on bringing Aaron Corner back?
Yeah, to your point about where he stacks, he might not be in the elite of offensive line coaches, but I do think he's in that next level. And I do think that's above necessarily where Bobby Johnson is. I don't know where Bobby Johnson falls, but I think he's in that next sort of
I don't think he's Dante Scarnecchia, Bill Callahan, Mike Munchak, those are all time. Alex Gibbs, those are all time great position coaches. From everything we're hearing, Munchak is actually going to pseudo retire into like a front office gig with the Broncos and not even coach anymore. So there's not that many of those guys around anymore. This is that next group.
Yeah, and maybe he'll end up there in 10 years. He'll be one of those guys that everyone wants their hands on, and he's borderline retiring. But no, I think he's it kind of came out of left field. This wasn't even a guy that I was thinking. He's been out of the game now for 2 years,
out for just 2021,
1 year. And so Eric followed up a little bit on that because people were saying, on Twitter, everyone was like, okay, well, why did he get fired from LA? Why wasn't he employed for a year? And it sounded like it was more of a mutual parting ways with LA, and that his son's there, and that his son took over. He didn't want there necessarily any type of like nepotism or anything like that, and they sort of just mutually parted ways, him and McVay, but no bad blood. That it was
when
not
his contract was up, he wasn't fired. It was just that
not retained.
He stepped away when his contract was up, and that I know Jordan Rodriguez, who we've had on the show, was one of the people that Eric checked in with and is very tapped into LA, and she actually put out a message too that she didn't see any contentious activity, and that it was something that very much was him deferring to his son having an opportunity to kind of be on his own.
Yeah, and that is the league a little bit too. Like not every parting ways is a contentious. There's trouble brewing or anything like that. It's just
I don't think Bobby Johnson leaving Buffalo was some huge contentious thing. I think that he had a relationship with Abel. His contract was up. They were happy to let him go, but I don't think it was like, if he wanted to stay, I think they would have been open to it. They might have discussed that. I don't think that it was some huge contentious clash that he had to go.
No.
But sometimes it's probably a better fit if everybody moves on.
Sure. Yeah. And so with this one, I'm happy. You heard Eric Wood came out right away, and you guys hear Eric Wood gush over him. Absolutely. And I think during the time here, Richie Incognito, a guy that we were close with, Eric had a relationship with, also gush over this type of coach. I think he gets players up. So this might be a really good time in the development of some of your younger guys. I think Bills fans are sold on a Rick Bates in your interior line, but he's still a young player, and you want somebody to maximize that potential. Spencer Brown, I'm very excited for what he can do to Spencer Brown. We saw flashes from Spencer Brown this year, but you're going to get into it a little bit later with the team as a whole and the variances. We saw some variances from Spencer Brown. So while there's excitement there's a lot of room to grow for a player like that. And I know people are they saw this hire, and immediately a lot of the thoughts were, can he turn around Cody Ford? My brain didn't even go there because I feel like that's the best case scenario.
That ship has sailed for me.
Yeah, you're maybe getting a rotational backup lineman at some point. But my first focus went to Rick Bates and Spencer Brown and whoever they bring in through this next draft. Tommy Doyle. Yeah, absolutely. Those
young,
types of guys.
Super athletic, upside.
Yeah, be your swing tackle for the future. Fantastic. That'd be great. So those young guys I'm really excited to see, because that's the one thing I didn't really see necessarily a ton of from Bobby Johnson. We sort of had this conversation about Eric Washington earlier on Twitter of, how do you judge a positional coach and some of the development? And it's hard because, is Deion Dawkins going to be pretty good anyway? I think maybe he probably was. And so we saw development of him under Bobby Johnson, but we didn't really see a lot of guys take steps forward throughout Bobby Johnson's time here. And then you saw the shuffling along the offensive line, Rick Bates finally coming to his own sort of in a break last case emergency situation. Who didn't see that? Was it Bobby Johnson not seeing that and maybe playing some of his guys over Rick Bates? Where does that type of stuff fall on? So it's good to get fresh eyes in here on this young group in some key spots. And so I'm excited for him to get his hands on them and come in. Hopefully we see an improvement at that position.
Yeah. I think that there's a reasonable expectation to do that, because obviously he's going to advocate to bring in some people just like Bobby Johnson did. I don't know that we're going to have big splashes from a free agency standpoint.
No.
But I know that, every team goes through and, every position coach is going to advocate for their guys and their people that they want to be able to bring in. And,
bring Richie back. Let's do it.
Richie's always welcome back. One unrestricted free agent that was with him in LA was Austin Corbett, and is a player that was, traded for and then flourished in LA. And that would be an interesting one. LA does not have cap room to retain people after this season. So that's just the kind of example how Feliciano came with, Bobby Johnson. And now that's the kind of name that could come in. And that could be the kind of thing where, I don't expect this, but if they were to move on from Darrell Williams, that's what I would expect to happen, is that, hey, you would use that money on someone like Austin Corbett
or John Miller. No, I'm just kidding.
or let's say we do a restricted free agent tender on Rick Bates, but somebody offers him a contract that we say, oh, well, that's a little crazy.
Yeah.
I'm not looking to do that. And then they pivot to an Austin Corbett instead. Otherwise, those are just the kind of names that you could see floating around there, with a name like Aaron Kromer. And any other thoughts on Kromer before we switch to the other hire?
No, I suggest that people go watch that video that Eric, Kendall, and Anthony did, because what they did a good job of doing too was there were some coaching seminars that they cut in and out of, and it kind of gives you an idea of their philosophy. And not that, this is something you and I were talking a little bit offline about, that these guys, just because they did something previously doesn't mean that they're going to come into the Bills and they're going to run the same exact scheme. Like the offense is going to operate how Ken Dorsey wants the offense to operate. But these guys are going to have say in those rooms, and they're going to have conversations in those rooms. And you get to see sort of how they coach, how they think. And I think that's what that video did a good job of showing. How did these guys think about football? So even, the stuff about Joe Brady, we touched on that a little bit last week. They really get into some of the details about where his coaching philosophy is. And same thing with Kromer. So they touch on all those guys. So if you want a real detailed, after this video, go check that one out. It just dropped last night, I believe. And so it's a really good deep dive into these guys' coaching philosophies.
And I know there was a question here from about Wendell as the offensive line coach with the Raiders, and I do believe it has been made official. I was just looking to make sure. But I believe that Wendell was officially hired by Josh McDaniels as the offensive line coach with the Raiders.
I hadn't seen it because that was one. There was that report that the Minnesota Vikings coach was coming.
Yeah,
and then it was Rauscher, and then it was immediately refuted, and then Wendell was on that list of people that were interviewed, and I was like, hey man, that's one I'd love to bring back. But then I looked for a confirmation that he went to the Raiders because I had heard it.
Yeah, same thing. I'm not seeing it official right now. So maybe that was in that same.
I'd take him back as an assistant if he.
Yeah. Well, and the same thing. Like I also think that maybe that was Rauscher was being interviewed for assistant offensive line coach. I don't know how those things work.
Sure.
So I have not seen anyone named as an assistant offensive line coach, and as far as I know, Ryan Wendell is in that interim right now, that his contract's up and he could be brought back or he could go to Vegas. We don't really know.
Yeah.
So the other hire that took place was one that had been intimated. That Eric on his show had shared that there wasn't an expectation that Heath Farwell was going to be back, and that there were obviously a lot of people connected that to when McDermott made the comments about an execution issue, but Eric, who I think was one of the first to share it, but others also shared some of the players' reactions on the field, that they thought it was going to be a pop-up, a short kick. I don't know if it was going to be a squib, but the thing that Bass was really good at, where he's good at popping it up and making them catch it like the 5-yard line and making the decision. You could tell the players expected that, everything that was there. When it came down to an execution issue, and I'll just leave it at that, there's only so many things that could mean, and that many people connected the dots. So that meant that the communication didn't get somewhere from McDermott to Farwell to Tyler Bass to know that was the case. I also think people probably jumped from everything that we've been told, that also wasn't the only reason, that there were many other reasons that Farwell was ready to move on, and that maybe wasn't the right fit in New York as a whole, and ready to be there from that standpoint. So either way, it was announced today that he moved to Florida to be the Jacksonville Jaguars special teams coordinator. And it was pretty immediate that Matthew Smiley was then promoted to be the new special teams coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. Matthew Smiley is one of those guys that a lot of plugged in, really connected fans may not have even realized he was the assistant special teams coach. I don't know that there's a lot of talk about assistant special teams coaches floating around. I can't sit here and pretend to have a super informed opinion on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I will simply say that so far, most of the position coach hires have been solid by this staff. They haven't batted 1,000. We just talked about a couple that were okay that we moved on from.
Yeah.
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that having Tyler Bass makes it pretty, and we're going to have a new punter. that it's going to be easier to do a good job. We'll continue to have pretty good coverage units, and they'll be fine. But I'm not overjoyed. I'm not concerned. It's fine.
Yeah, the only reason I knew of this guy is because he was held over when they hired Farwell from Crossman. He's been with the Bills longer than Farwell was, so he was here I think in 2017 and Farwell came in. Yeah.
It's funny, he was actually the Jaguars assistant special teams coach 13 to 16. He got here in 17 right. And was there before Farwell. So he's kept over from Crossman, who was just kept in Miami. That dude is like a cockroach. Any Crossman is impossible to fire.
So weird. And so that's the only reason I knew of him, though, because it was weird to me that they kept him after fire. That Crossman, I don't know if people remember. It was the worst special teams in the league. It was terrible. I was on this show. I think this was before the days of you and I being together.
Set a record for special teams penalties.
Dude, there was like 5 weeks in a row where we were just like, you know how much I hate talking about special teams on this show, where I was just like,
Michael here is hoping that it means he'll be a good coach if we don't have to hear about special teams on the postgame.
Exactly.
Show. I'll still talk about it. It's fine.
No. But dude, so that's where my hate for talking about special teams came from, was those Danny Crossman years of just like, dude, they're losing us games. Like, it's so bad. And I don't like firing coaches midseason, but I was advocating like, get Crossman out of here. But that they kept his guy and didn't let Farwell bring in his own type of assistant, it just threw a flag to me. So outside of that, I don't know much about the guy, except for that I hope he didn't get his tutelage under Danny Crossman and learn more a little bit from Farwell. But one thing I want to bring up here, because I think there's some mixed stats. I've seen some stories that have gone out, and people have been referencing this Sports Illustrated special team stat, which is not one that I really had ever heard of before today. So I don't really know totally how they accumulate those numbers.
The only one I ever referenced was Rick Goslin.
That's the one.
Okay. So he's the guy. He was a writer for Dallas for a long time. Now, I can't speak to the accuracy, but I can speak to the fact he's been doing it for like 30 years.
Sure.
Of rank. And so he has a system that people reference a lot. I don't know a way to validate how accurate it is.
And I've heard of it before, and I don't know how to validate if it's accurate or not. But one thing that that I like is DVOA. And DVOA tends to show out pretty well when you look back at seasons past. And here's the thing. So they were 32nd in 2018, Danny Crossman. They got Heath Farwell. They went to 21st in 2019. They were up to 4th in 2020. I think we saw that, right? Like Tyler Bass comes in, he's lights out. They didn't have to punt really ever, so punting was an issue. They were covered really well. Returns was pretty good, especially Andre Roberts had a nice year. This past year in DVOA and special teams, they went back down to 19th, and it was something we talked about week in and week out. And I think, people assume they saw that stat where they were top 8 or top 10 in Goslin's stats. But if you look at it, like, special teams had a lot of problems this year. So
we'll talk about it at the end of the show with DVOA as well as variance. It was Tyler Bass had a great year.
Yes.
Our coverage units were
pretty good.
Good. Like, I don't remember any bad returns. Like, we were consistently pretty good. And there was a ton of the ones where that pop-up kick that, again, we should have done at the end of the KC game, where we would tackle guys at the 18 and the 13. Multiple of those in the Patriots game that stick out to me. But then you would also have, nobody wanted Micah Hyde back there returning punts. That wasn't a good thing. Nobody
wanted weird muff in the Redskins
Washington
game. Not Redskins, the Washington game. Like, that's stuff like that was coaching.
The fact that we had to have multiple returners benched during the year. Our punter was horrible.
The frustrations that we had with McKenzie not fielding kicks or taking bound, like, some of that stuff is on coaching. And the punt game, like, there was a lot of frustration.
We had a punt blocked, and then when people overreacted to the block, but underrated the fact that he was terrible. He was just a really bad punter all year long. And good on Brandon Beane for saying in his end of year press conference that, hey, I'll paraphrase in what he meant. What he wanted to say was, hey, we realized that Matt Hawk sucked, but Tyler Bass was having a great year. We didn't want to mess with Bass with the holding and bring in a new holder mid-go. So we just kind of dealt with the fact that Hawk was a terrible punter, and then said, but are we planning to look into it this year? Yes, very much. Which tells you all you need to know. Matt Hawk is not going to be on this team. They're going now, whether that's a draft pick or a free agent or whatever, we'll see where that goes. But Matt Hawk is not going to be on this team.
Right.
And so from that standpoint, you give Matthew Smiley, he still has Tyler Bass. We're still going to have most of the core
I think
coverage
Neal's
unit.
a priority in free agency to bring back. Yeah,
I won't be shocked if they rework Matakevich, Steele,
Sure.
and that, we have other good core, we'll still have the Jake Kumros of the world to do that. So we're going to have the important pieces. And now any other punter should be pretty good, not as horrible.
I don't want to say it can't get worse, but
it always can get worse.
It can always get worse.
But ultimately, I think he's going to be set up where special teams won't be a problem. Our offense is going to be great again. We're not going to punt all that much. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. So hopefully we're going to talk a ton about special teams. We'll learn a little bit about this guy as we get into the season. But I think some fans I saw were worried, the Bills special teams has been so good and we lost, Farwell. And I don't know that they were as good as that list that from Gosselin showed. I think they were an average unit here this year.
Well, and like you brought up, we were used to Crossman and he was better than that. So it seemed great.
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right, obviously there's a couple small pieces floating around there. There'll probably be an assistant special teams coach. There'll probably be an assistant offensive line coach. I don't expect any other big changes as far as we've been told. And, the people that we know that are connected, Aaron and I hear everything third hand, but we hear a lot of things third hand. Everything that we've heard, there's no other changes expeced. I don't think
it looks
Chad
like
Hall's going to get poached or anything like that.
Yeah, Leslie Frazier's not getting a head coaching job.
Now all of them are filled. Those are all done.
Yeah.
Everything that I've heard, we're going to keep everybody else that's there. It'll just be some small pieces, assistant position coaches, nothing else that should pop up. We think everybody else is going to be pretty much in place.
I would think so. I don't. Maybe some of these guys that are filling out their staffs in other places will move some guys up. But nothing I've heard.
Yeah, so I don't know that every offensive coordinator position has been filled, but I also haven't heard Chad Hall get any interviews, so I don't think that's imminent.
Another third hand thing I had heard was, obviously not for offensive coordinator, but that there was some requests for him to move laterally, and that was blocked.
Correct.
So
I believe Dable requested to interview him for the Giants wide receiver coach position, and that was declined because he's under contract with the Bills.
Right.
I could see an Eric Washington or a Bobby Babich get in an interview somewhere, but I don't anticipate us losing anybody else. I think the staff is pretty much set. It'll just be some window dressing of, some quality control coach or some assistant position coach tacked on here. There, I think everybody else is pretty well set. And it sounds like Bean is working to promote from within to replace Joe Shane.
Yeah.
Because he talked about the fact that Brian Gain, Terrence Gray, Malik Boyd, and Lake Dawson are all going to pick up pieces of the slack to finish this out. And then his comment was, then we'll see about it after the draft, which to me, I don't know that it's a straight competition between the four of them, but hey, one of the four of them probably is going to take the assistant GM job, and we'll see where that falls at the end. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that.
Yeah, I am interested to see that one. My guess is Gain, and that the other guys sort of stay in the roles they were in, because Gain was like a special assistant or something when he came back, right? Like he was
the GM for the Texans.
Yeah, and he was in that upper echelon on Bean's side, and then there was that weird story about whatever happened with him and the Texans and how he sort of caught some blame and got out, and they brought him right back to Buffalo, but they didn't give him necessarily a top front office job. It was sort of like counsel.
Hey, come help us with some stuff.
Correct. Be in that sort of farm system league for when we lose a Joe Shane come back. So that was my thinking, was that maybe with his GM experience that he goes right back into that assistant GM role, because he's not really one of these pro personnel guys or a scout type of guy. So I don't know if that he would fill the roles of Dawson or Boyd.
The one that it's actually not those two. The one that intrigues me is his comments on Terrence Gray.
Right.
Because I kind of think it's going to be between the two of them, and it just reading tea leaves and the way they made comments. I do agree that I think the most likely is Gain, but he made a couple comments on Terrence Gray that made me wonder if that would be a possibility. So we'll see. And I don't anticipate any of that till after the draft. All good problems. They have four very talented people, multiple of which Brian Gain has been a GM. Both Gray and Boyd have interviewed for GM spots. So people who are well regarded around the NFL, and they'll continue to build that up. Dan Morgan got jobs, Joe Shane got jobs. They'll continue to promote from within, and I'm sure we'll see some other people brought in from outside to be able to add to that talent and keep that pipeline going.
Yep.
So as we kind of pivot there, we're going to spend a little bit of time here to end the show tonight with our final things on the 2021 season. We're not going to keep dipping back into this. It's painful enough for us to talk about it, but we do want to go through a couple more things to close out our evaluation on the season. So we're going to go through anyone who listened last week. Aaron kind of led us through a really good exercise called Lofton exercise, where we'll talk about, what do we feel about each player. We're going to do that tonight for the defense. And then I'm going to share some information on just some of the things that we found about just how crazy this season was, hopefully some reasons to appreciate it, and hopefully some things to look for in the future. So we'll see where those things go. But without further ado, Aaron, why don't we dive into tonight's Lofton exercise for the defense?
Yeah, the quicker we get through this, then we can stop talking relive this season. So let's go through the Lofton exercise. For those that didn't listen last week or don't know what this is, at the end of the year, we've been doing this here at Cover One now for a few years, where you go through your roster player by player and you list them. There's 3 options. He can win games for us. We can win with him, or we need better at that position. And so we're going through again the roster as it was on our lads at the end of the year here. Some of these guys are going to be free agents and won't be back anyway, but it's just a good exercise to sort of see where your holes are, see where your strengths are as we get ready to ramp into this offseason, get into free agency, and then work our way towards the draft. So let's start with my favorite part of the defense here, and that's the defensive backfield. We'll start at the safety position. I think this one's easy at the top here, Greg. Both Poyer and Hyde, I have them as he can win games for us, and they've proven it.
100%. I don't think there's any question. I think that's only been solidified and grown over their time together. They've both earned multiple contracts. They're both coming up and probably their 3rd contracts with the Bills here. I think they're both going to retire as Buffalo Bills. I do think we need to realize and recognize that we're not going to have them forever. They're both in their early 30s now, and that luckily safeties do age reasonably well in the NFL and relatively gracefully. And obviously, both of them show that their athleticism isn't going anywhere tomorrow, but that they're a luxury we're not going to have for 5 more years. It's at some point that train is coming to an end. But right now, they are both definitively in they can win games for us mode, and that's an awesome, great feeling.
Yeah. You want to know a little bit of a hot take of mine that I've had is I think Levi Wallace would transition to a really nice free safety. I really do.
Interesting.
He's lengthy. He knows where to be.
Obviously knows, the instincts and I will say Micah Hyde's not some
freak
elite athlete. He's obviously an
smooth
NFL caliber. Yes, very, very smooth. Yeah. No wasted steps, no wasted movement, and that's not a crazy comparison for Levi Wallace.
I've watched a lot of Levi. If nobody knows that.
Sneaky.
So then we'll
tuck that one away.
Yeah, right. Damar Hamlin and Jaquan Johnson. I have these both as we need better. I think I'll preface this with last show I mentioned that some of these we need better doesn't mean that we need to replace the player.
We need better from them.
Correct. And I think I want to see Damar Hamlin sort of develop into this role. Josh Thomas is another one that I would like to see develop into this role over the summer, because you talked about it. These guys are starting to hit that other side of 30 here. Who knows when they'll age out? Safeties do age out more gracefully than other positions, but that father time comes quick for some people, and you just never know when it's going to happen. And the Bills are, the cap's going to go up, and league wide, and some of these cap numbers for the Bills are going to go up. There are going to probably run up to some point where, I do think both Poyer and Hyde know the value of each other, know the value of this system, and will take deals to stay here. But at some point, it might not be viable to keep them both together long term. So one of these young guys that you have in this building has to continue to develop and be a guy that just we can win games with. They don't have to be a Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde, but they have to be a guy. And even in the case of an emergency, we've had, a knock on wood, some great health stretches, especially from those two in their time here, where if they had to miss a stretch of games, man, right now I don't feel good about Damar Hamlin coming in and winning games with those guys. So they need to get to that next level here. Would you agree that they're there right now, though, as we need better from the backups at the safety position?
I do. And, this is going to be a good example. This is the last year of Jaquan Johnson's deal, and I won't care if they re-sign him after this coming season or not. And that right now, I don't have any reason to care if we keep Damar Hamlin, and if we lost Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer, I would make the case that our replacement for them is not on the roster, that we would have to go get, like, if something happened and we had I'm not even gonna say it. So something happened in the offseason where you still had time. I don't think they would be like, okay, well, next man up, we gotta have DeMar Hamlin be a starting safety for us. I think they would go make a move, and they would go get someone else. So now that's not. I'm not going to compare it to like my approach to Dawson Knox or something like that, because neither of them have even shown his potential. But that doesn't mean that they can't prove to become more than that. Right now, neither has shown anything where they could be depended on as a starter. And Ronald actually here making a good point. Not that I want Dean Marlowe to come back, but I don't even know that we did not have a Dean Marlowe player on the roster this year. Marlowe was not special, not anything crazy, but he was at least a pluggable piece that could play reps and could start for a 2-game stretch and not fall by the wayside. I don't know that we know that with these other guys, and that maybe Dean Marlowe is not that guy anymore and aged out, but whoever that next Dean Marlowe type is, where, hey, yeah, it wouldn't be great. They're nowhere near Poyer or Hyde level, but it wouldn't be terrible if he had to step in and start. I think maybe what we kind of hoped Saran Neal was going to be, it just hasn't really become. But I agree. I think that's the right designation for them. We need better. Maybe it's them, but I'm not going to count on it.
Yeah. So then we'll go into the other part of this defensive backfield. Obviously, Trey White, all pro when he is healthy. He is a guy you can win games for us. And here we might get a little bit of pushback on this one, because I still have, even after that last performance that we saw from this defense, and my sign for those listening says Bills defense is still good. So I'm not going to judge them necessarily just by that Kansas City loss. I'm judging this by the full year's body of work. And so I got all three of these guys, Dane Jackson, Levi Wallace, and Taron Johnson, are all guys that we can still win with. I think if you brought that back, ran it back, I know people want to draft cornerback, want a new cornerback. That's fine. I want an upgrade for Levi Wallace too. But I think if you run it back, you're still looking at a Super Bowl contending football team that can win a lot of football games.
And I don't know that it's as simple as, oh, if we didn't lose Trey White, we'd be in the Super Bowl today. But I think you can make the case that if Trey White was here, it's reasonable we might still be playing as of, like, that's possible that he could have made one of the plays that we needed to be made in that last game. And so Trey White's a slam dunk. That's easily a player that can win games for you. I agree. Taron Johnson for sure is a player.
Actually, Taron, I almost kicked up, but
ahead of the other two. I don't know that I mean, I guess you could make the case he won that.
He won
that playoff game for us. Yeah. He won that Pittsburgh and that Baltimore game for us. I don't think he's quite at that level consistently enough to put him in that tier, but he's at the front end of can win with him. Levi Wallace is definitively a player you can win with. You want to know why I know that? Because we've won with him for 5 years.
Right.
So he obviously is a player you can win with. He's that consistently borderline guy of that designation. He is the you can win with him cornerback.
Right.
I appreciate you very much, man. That really means a lot. Appreciate your support. I think I'm torn on Dane Jackson, and I can't decide if how much of that was that stretch where we didn't really play a lot of teams that could test us from a passing standpoint, or if he also was good enough and was just that kind of guy. I'm not ready to say he's on the same level as Levi Wallace. So you put Taron Johnson at the front end of that group. Levi Wallace is the definition of that group. I'll put Dane Jackson barely in that group. I want better, but I don't know that we can't win with him if we go into next season that it's a draft pick and Dane Jackson starting because Trey's not ready to come back at the beginning of the season. We'll probably live and we probably can win with him. But I wouldn't mind an upgrade. So I want better, but I know that we need better.
In the perfect world where he's your third cornerback.
Yes.
The guy that's, if Levi or whoever your cornerback two's hurt and has to come in and spell.
Your third outside corner, your fourth overall corner.
I think, yes, right. I think he's proven that he can, what we said about the safety position, right? We don't know that we have a guy that could fill in for a handful of games. I think Dane Jackson's proven that he can be a guy that can fill in a stretch at the very least. That's so his floor.
He's what we would have graded Dean Marlowe as before if we did this exercise when we had Marlowe.
And that's his floor. And he's a young player that I think still has room to develop. So I think his floor is, hey, this is a guy you can bring in a spot as that fourth cornerback, third outside corner, and win games with. And that's important to in a long NFL season where passing is at a premium in this league, because the next guy is Cam Lewis. And I think we need better. I don't know that. I think there's a lot of people that are high on Cam Lewis. That's fine. When he's played, he's flashed at times, but he's just another guy. He's
Elijah Griffin, Tim Harris, any of the other guys that are floating around. Yeah, they're invited back for camp next year, but I won't care if they make the team or not.
Yep.
And I will say that I do expect Dane Jackson to make the team next year. I do. So, I mean, it's not like it's a problem. I would love if he's not starting.
Yeah. This one might get me into how we're going to move to linebackers a little bit here.
Although we didn't say Saran Neal. So I do include Saran Neal as
that's fine.
A player you can win with because he's a special teams player. Ability. I don't really want him on the field defensively.
For special teams ability, he's absolutely a player you can win with, and he's one of my free agent priorities when we start to get into free agency, because I think he might be our Matthew Slater type of player where he's just. I think he's really on the verge of being a top special teams ace in this league, and he's one of those guys you just keep a roster spot for and hope that he never has to play his actual position.
Yep. Just like Matthew said with Pitt. Great count. That's a great count.
Middle linebackers here. We're going to go Tremaine Edmonds. I have him listed as a guy we can win with. And I think he's closer to that border of a guy that can win games for us than Twitter would want us to believe. And that's why I believe the 5th year option and all that stuff, like he needs to be be extended here and be part of the future for the Buffalo Bills, because I do think he's really on that borderline. And if they can get some of the stuff in front of him, right? We saw Eric breaking down some of the gap issues in the run game where he was in the gaps and stuff like that. If they can get some of that right for him, I think that he can take that next step and be a guy that can win games for us. But right now I have him as a guy that we can win with him.
100% on board, the exact same way you described it, the exact same potential and opportunity. We both, I shared Lance Zierlein's mock where he mocked Jordan Davis to the Bills.
Let's get some bodies in front of him.
If you give me a 340-pound monster in front of Tremaine Edmonds, I swear to you, you would see a different player. Like a guy that could consistently keep him clean. I think you would see more. And now, does more mean that he becomes Ray Lewis or Brian Urlacher or Luke Kuechly?
No, or even Fred Warner. I don't know.
Yeah, no, but that he would be better and more consistent than we see now. And that I think he can be a good starting caliber linebacker. I don't know that he's ever going to be elite. I don't know that he's ever going to be special. I think he's going to be good. Yeah. And as long as we pay him to be good, I'm fine with that. He's a good starter. It's totally fine.
Yeah, and my beef with the people that want to move on from him is like, well, you're just making a pretty big hole. Like, what are you going to do to fill that hole? And if you talk to offensive coordinators or even quarterbacks that the Bills play against, the type of that length and athleticism, what he provides, does alter some of these games and what teams are able to do. So we'll move on. I think this might be my more controversial one, because I think I have Matt Milano as a guy that you can win with him. Yep. I think that there's times where he's flashed and played so dominant that he kind of could be in that border of a guy that can win games for you. But he's also, this is one thing that bothers me, is he probably has just as many of the same type of mistakes that frustrate people about Tremaine Edmonds having, but then nobody picks on Matt Milano or talks about it ever. Not that I don't want Twitter to take up arms against Matt Milano, but to me, it seems not fair, Greg, that like everyone is attacking Tremaine Edmonds constantly. And then I see Matt Milano make similar mistakes. Nobody's bringing it up ever. What's going on?
I'm mad that you stole my take. My hot take is Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds are the same.
You think?
They're the same. They're both have flashes of elite plays and then inconsistent over pursuit and missed tackles and failure to get off blocks. They both have good moments in coverage and they both get roasted.
Milano's probably made more splash plays.
Sure. There's also, because of the narrative of Matt Milano as this scrappy college safety 5th round pick converting into a linebacker that we got way more than a 5th round value from, people seem appreciative of the fact that he became a good starting linebacker. Matt Milano is also not elite. Matt Milano is also not a Pro Bowl linebacker. Matt Milano is also not in line to be paid like a $20 million a year player, and that's why he didn't get that deal. He's a good starting linebacker.
Yeah, the defense is better with both of them.
Yeah, of course.
Like, yeah.
Tremaine Edmonds is also a good starting linebacker.
Right.
He's not elite. He's not all pro. He's not going to get $20 million a year. And it's because he's good in coverage and makes some plays and also has lapses. Milano and Tremaine Edmonds are the same thing. They are both players we can win with, and neither of them have consistently been players that will win games for us. They both had flashes. They both have had moments, and I agree. I think Milano's even had a few more flashes, but I don't understand why his shortcomings and periods of time where he goes long stretches where he can't get off of blocks and that he just gets blocked over and over and over again, and nobody rails on him the way that they rail on Tremaine Edmonds. Nobody gets he misses tackles more often than Tremaine. He has a worse missed tackle percentage than Tremaine Edmonds.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I don't understand. Actually, I take that back. I do understand. It is the narrative. It is the story, the story arc of the fact that he was this scrappy day 3 pick that turned himself into a starter, and that Tremaine Edmonds started up here as a day 1 starter, as a 1st round pick. Well, we're past that. We're 4 years into their careers now. We're going into year 5 for these guys, year 6, to be for Milano. We're past that. They now are at the expectation of
Milano's
what we
not
have.
on controlled costs anymore.
Yeah, he's not some cheap, scrappy 5th round pick anymore. Now he's a $40 million linebacker. Right. They both need to be held to the same standard. Right. Both of them are good starters. Both of them are guys I want on the team. Both of them are players we can win with. I want more from both. I'm not more frustrated with Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano, and it frustrates me that people only harp on things Edmonds does wrong and never, ever bring up the equal amount of things that Matt Milano does wrong.
Yeah. And I want to clarify what we're saying here. We're not dogging on either one of these guys. We want.
I think they're both good starters. I want to extend Tremaine Edmonds.
Correct. Yeah,
I'm happy to extend him and keep him on the team.
Yeah, I agree. So the rest of this linebacker room, though, I think we need better across the board. AJ Klein, Terrell Dotson, Andre Smith, Tyler Manikevich. I think Smith and Manikevich, maybe a little bit better just for their special teams ability, and that they're sort of in that same role as Sarah Neal, where we don't really want them playing linebacker. They're more special teams guys. But across the board, if something was to happen to Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano, it gets worse behind them. I do think AJ Klein was a nice luxury this past year. He's fine. He can fill in, but I'd like to see better, younger, more explosive, something that matches the athleticism.
Yeah, he's actually probably about what you want or can win with as a 3rd linebacker in today's NFL. Just
same way I had Dane
not
Jackson.
At the salary.
Probably.
Yeah, correct. Sure. Not at the salary level. So if you want to say that just from a pure on-field talent standpoint, AJ Klein is a player you can win with because that kind of special teams guy and 3rd linebacker is what you can win with. Sure.
I'll hear that argument. Yeah.
I think that younger, cheaper, I prefer both. And then anybody else, I was hoping that Terrell Dotson would make AJ Klein expendable, and he clearly wasn't. He couldn't take that job. He would have taken that job if he could have, and he didn't. So I'm not, the same thing. People got excited. Could Andre Smith be a thing? Could Joe Giles Harris be a thing? I think they would have been. I don't think any of them are the answer to anything there. No. And I expect there to be a veteran addition to replace AJ Klein. If he leaves, that we will just add another 3rd linebacker, maybe to a cheaper deal, but then we would just add another one.
Sure. Let's move over to edge. This one's pretty weird for me because I think there's a lot of. I put out a tweet about Jerry Hughes this week. I think you saw and retweeted about where his production was, and the lack of sacks I think is really clouding a lot of people's view of especially this edge position in this Buffalo Bills defense. I think throughout this offseason we'll probably have a little bit more time to break down really how this Bills defense operates and why some of these sacks either do or don't happen. But as far as this exercise is concerned, I'm going to just run through it because it's mostly we can win with them. I have Greg Rousseau, Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison, Boogie Basham and F.A. Obata as all guys that you can win with as a rotation. The Bills like to rotate their defensive line. I think all these guys are guys you can win football games with. And then AJ Epinesa we need better because where he's at and the type of player he is, he actually played himself somehow into fewer snaps this year when we thought that he was going to be a guy that took more snaps. So everyone along that edge list, except for AJ Epinesa, was a we can win with him. But nobody, here's the problem for the Bills defense, nobody was a guy you can win because of.
Yeah. I think that's accurate. I think I probably have Epinesa and Basham the same.
Sure.
So either I would have both of them as barely you can win with them, or I'd have both of them as we need better.
That's
I
fair.
think they were pretty similar. I think their snap counts were also pretty similar. Towards the end, they were both rotational guys, somewhere between 18 to 25 snaps in most games. So I have them the same, but I agree on the right. And honestly, I actually think I'd put F.A. Obata in that group. I think that his one awesome game with multiple sacks clouded over a whole bunch of meh games that were fine.
But as a fifth defensive end piece guy,
similar to our AJ Klein
conversation.
Like, what are we asking him to be?
Right.
That's probably fair. But yeah, I think that Hughes, Addison, Rousseau for sure are players you can win with. Ideally, all of them would, of course, be better off if they were opposite a Max Crosby or a Joey Bosa or a Khalil Mack or a Daniil Hunter or whatever. Of course, they would all be better off. They're not set up to be, none of them are number ones. None of them are number one, fear factor pass rushers. And we have to kind of manufacture around that. So that's the issue, is that we can say that you can win with them and also say the Bills don't have a sufficient pass rush to make other teams fear it because they don't have that number one guy on the outside anyways. We'll get to it on the interior. So I agree. I have Hughes, Addison, and Rousseau as you can win with. And then I have Epinesa, Obata, and Basham as need better, but all three of them, I'm open to them being the guy who could be better. Sure. And I hope that's the case with 2 second-round picks. I really hope
one of them's
they become guys. We need one of them to pan out and be more consistent than what we showed.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So we'll move to the interior now because this is where I get a little excited because I got Ed Oliver finally. I got a guy here that we can win games. He can win games for us. I think Ed Oliver, that you've said it, I've said it, that second half of the season was all pro level. Ed Oliver, he's finally lived up to the pick. He's making the splash plays that everybody wanted to see. He's a dominant force in the middle of this defense. And I think it can only get better if you're that Zerline draft comes true and you put a Jordan Davis next to him, or even get in one of these bigger type pass rushers. Or Jones, somebody big, either on the outside or on the inside to take some of the pressure off of him. He's really going to explode in this next year. I have Harrison Phillips as a guy you can win with him. Star Lotulelei as a guy I think you can win with him. Vernon Butler, get him out of here. You need better than that. And Justin Zimmer is a guy I like, but I still think it's a guy you need better. I think he's fans loved Zimmer. I like Zimmer. I think he's fine, but I think it's more of what, like, hey, this is a hard hat, lunch pail guy. He's got a big motor, but I'd like to see a little bit more in that rotation into the future. But that's where I stand. So I got Oliver can win games for us. Lotulelei and Phillips can win with them. Butler and Zimmer, we need better. And then Eli Ankow came back. And so I'd say he's another we need better as well. I see him as a practice squad sort of last guy activated.
Outside of the bottom, Butler is, I think he can lose games for you.
Yeah.
I'll put Zimmer and Starr together. I think Zimmer is on par with this level of what Starr has left. And maybe I'm tainted by his post-COVID play and how much he had left in the tank. He did have some of those flashes earlier where we thought maybe we were onto something here. So we'll see where that goes. But I think Justin Zimmer is a player you can win with. I think Justin Zimmer can be your fourth defensive tackle in a winning defense. I agree. Harrison Phillips is absolutely a player you can win with. I think he's firmly
priority free agent.
Absolutely. Probably it might be the top one out of the free agents, but we'll talk through that. And then I agree. Ed Oliver went to a level that we had not seen consistently. We had seen flashes in his rookie year. We saw flashes in the Dallas game. In his second year, we saw flashes again. Now we saw it consistently, and we saw it for a stretch of 10 plus games, not just a half a season. He consistently went went better. Is there a level below? We need better for Butler. Yeah, Vernon Butler is the guy that I still won't ever forgive them for. Every time I watched the Raiders play and had to watch Quentin Jefferson and to realize that we could have had either guy for the same amount of money and that we chose Vernon Butler just because we thought we needed another body at defensive tackle instead of the rotational guy Quentin Jefferson was. I'll still never get over that. Ed Oliver was third in the NFL and defensive tackle and quarterback hits. He did end up with 6 sacks, which is a really nice number from a defensive tackle. Yeah. He was, I think, 12th in the NFL in total pressures, which is quarterback hits, hurries and sacks combined. It's just, he was a really special player this year. And I want to see another step forward. I want to see even more production. I want to see a season's worth of there where he has a 10 sack season overall, because he doesn't wait until the 6th game to get his first sack. And granted, they joked about it. I think he literally had 3 sacks called back by penalty in the first half of the year. Yeah. But he did have a sack and got to it, and somebody else messed it up behind him. So, ultimately he probably did have closer to 9 sacks on the year. But we saw the impact play in and play out, and he is there. And I certainly wish we had more can win games for us in the front 7. And I think that it's a shame that with the money we've spent and the repeated amount of draft picks, that we also still think we have a pretty legitimate need at pass rush. It's a shame, but it is what it is. And that part of that will come in internally, that we'll see another step forward from Ed Oliver. And then we need to see, I think the one most exciting one here is the potential for can win games for us is Gregory Rousseau just had a game at an age and at his 2nd year ever as a pass rusher. And that after a full year off of football, and still played pretty well and showed flashes of that already having the discipline, the contain, the run defense, the pass rush can come. I think that he'll learn some of those moves. You learn to use the crazy long leverage that he has with those arms. I think we could see some more, more potential from him as we go there. So there's upside there. And then obviously if we can get Epenesa or Basham to a level of, hey, we can win with them where they're consistently contributing and at least replacing, the Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison type, that as they age out, we can be in decent shape. But we'll, as we go through further discussions of the future, we'll talk about some of the guys that we have as targets outside of the team, right? And potentially with the draft to bring in more talent here. But ultimately, I'd like to see more than what we did. Obviously, the way we graded them shows that the secondary kind of carries the day on this team, and I don't think that's a shock to anybody. The Trey White, Taron Johnson, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, they're the guys who make this work.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's hear some of this variant stuff. I've been waiting to, you teased me with it last week, and I want to hear what you found.
So one of the final things that we wanted to go through, I think that, we've talked about this, a couple different areas to go through, that the way that the season went and how it ended kind of leaves obviously a bad taste in the mouth. And it's something that it's hard to reconcile what this team was like and how it went, in the way that it did with such an ugly ending, that there were some incredible highs in this season and some incredible potential. And I know at one point, some of the guys from Football Outsiders, actually, Aaron Chass actually talked about the fact they were the highest variance team in NFL history. And that some people are like, oh, well, that's not good. And granted, variance means that when you have that downside, it's not a good thing. And you talk about losing games to Jacksonville, getting smoked by Indianapolis at one point, a weird loss to Pittsburgh to open the season. Those are all things that are not acceptable. Those are not good games. Heck, we didn't even deserve to win the Atlanta game in the way that we did. It ended up being they covered the spread and won, but it was an ugly game. But when you look at other teams, so I went through and I look, okay, well, I see how DVOA, where the spikes were and how dominant some of these performances were. And I went back and looked at, okay, well, how often did teams like Tampa Bay and Green Bay and Kansas City and Cincinnati and the Rams, how often did these teams hit the peaks that the Bills did? And what I was shocked with is the answer is 0. None of them hit. So, the way DVO ranks it is, hey, how badly did you beat your opponent relative to how good your opponent is.
Right.
So compared to how everybody else played against that opponent, how did you do? And it's on a 100-point scale, 0 being exactly average. And then if you go, 5% more, that means you beat them 5% worse than the average team. -5 means you did 5% worse, so you in both directions. So say as an example, even though we won the Atlanta game from a DVOA standpoint, we got a -21.6% because we did worse than what most teams do against Atlanta. Right. We just made the score look that good. Well, the Bills had 4 games where they were at 87% or above, 3 games above 100, 2 of them at 121% and 138%. No other team had that. The Chiefs had 1 game over 100. The Rams had 0. The Bengals had 0. The Buccaneers had 0. The Packers had 0. So the peaks of what and why we kept saying everything was on the table, why it's so frustrating to look and say that why aren't they playing right now? They could be the best team in the league, is because we not only saw peak performance, we saw some unprecedented levels of performance. And we saw that later on where those different pieces came from are why there should be so much hope in the rest of the year. And granted, they need to figure out a way not to have some of those embarrassing losses. But you want to know what? The Bengals lost to the Jets and then got smoked by the Browns in back-to-back weeks. It happens. Those kind of things happen. Teams lose embarrassing games. It's just the way that this league works to be able to get those things together. So it's a situation where it's, a critical need to be able to understand the season ended in a way we didn't want. It ended in a painful fashion. It's not acceptable. We wanted better. They needed to go further. They needed to cash in on this talented season, but that doesn't make it a failure. It was still a great performance. It was still a lot of amazing things to see and reason to be hopeful about the future, that it wasn't as painful as what the ending seemed.
Yeah, I think you put it great. And it's an interesting way to look at, because my frustration all season, Greg, has been when we talk about how good things were at times, everyone just compares it. Well, you beat up on the Houston Texans. Well, you beat up on these teams early on that weren't good teams. But that is what DVOA. This is why I pound the table so hard.
We beat them worse than anyone else.
Correct.
Beat them.
Correct. And when you even just look at the raw DVOA stats, like that is what it compares against, is league wide. How did other people perform against this team? And what was the expected performance against this team? And it doesn't matter that you played a inferior team, you dominated them. And that is what matters in this league. My issue is the variances that were on the low end. My sign again here says Bill's defense was still good. I think that there's this idea out there of, we got to fire Leslie Frazier. We got to burn this defense to the ground and start over because they got smoked by the Kansas City Chiefs, which they did. They got smoked by the Chiefs in the most important game of the year. I agree. And it's the second year in a row that the Chiefs sent the Bills season to a sad ending. So I get where people's heads are at. I get where the emotion's at. But it's time to step back. We're a few weeks removed from this. It's time to step back and look at what this defense was able to do this year. And they're a big part of those elite variant games. And even in the games where the Bills were not blowing teams out and were on the low end of that variance, the defense was still good in most of those games, which is why they were able to win a game against like Atlanta, which is why they were able to stay in that. The way that offense played in that Jacksonville game, Jacksonville should have won that game like 28-10.
The reason it was 9-6 and up literally until the very last drive of the game, we still thought we had a chance, is because the defense kept us in the game.
Correct. And so I'm very frustrated right now.
They literally had 2 bad performances all season. The Indy game and then the division championship game. Otherwise they played 17 other very, very good games.
The Tennessee game was not great, I don't think, from the defense.
That's fair.
But still, out of a 17,
I won't hold the ball bouncing off of Micah Hyde's helmet and Julio Jones getting a 65-yard catch against the defense.
Right. Yeah, and there was a holding on that Derrick Henry run too. If we're going to be nitpick that performance a little
3
bit,
holdings maybe.
Yeah, right. But I'm very frustrated now because there is just this recency bias narrative right now within the fan base that this defense is really bad. and that they can't keep up with the rest of the league. And that's just not true. And one thing that you made a good point in one of our private chats, I think with all the Cover One content guys, was we're talking about the Cincy game. Well, guess what, guys? Like, Cincy doesn't, everyone's talking about, oh, we need speed on defense. Well, Cincy didn't beat Kansas City Chiefs with speed, right? And they used a lot of the same stuff that the Bills were throwing at Kansas City. They just did it with a more successful, the pass rush helped, but the Bills had more pressures than Cincinnati did, right? Like, so it was a bad day for the Buffalo Bills. A bad day does not equal rip everything down
just
to
like it was a bad day
people.
for Patrick Mahomes against
Correct.
the Bengals. They didn't all of a sudden figure him out or shut him down. He played a bad game. He played a terrible game.
He played a bad half.
Josh Allen played a bad game against the Jaguars.
Right. And so I don't want us to overreact to, I get that is the hurdle that the Bills have to overcome. There is improvements that need to be made to this Bills team, just like there is no matter where you're. If you win the Super Bowl, you still got to continue to improve to continue on and win more. I still think you said at the beginning of the show, the Bills are probably a better team than the Bengals are, and they're in the Super Bowl right now.
They are.
Yeah. I think that they're on par with Kansas City. I don't think it's Kansas City wins that game 9 out of 10 times. I think it's 50-50 of who wins those types of games. The game
that the Bills went into Kansas City and beat them 38-20 was a normal game.
More indicative.
It wasn't some like fancy reason that they were able to beat them like that. Like they beat them.
Yes. The Bills defense was legitimately ranked all season long as a top 3 DVOA defense by all metrics. And in the most important category, passing defense in this league, they were a top passing defense, and half the season was without Trey White. And so I'm very frustrated that there's this idea that it's just really bad. It's a bad defense. We need to do all these different things. Jerry Hughes sucked. Levi Wallace sucked. Like, none of that's true. They're all guys like we just went through that you can win with. We need better at certain positions, but this was a really good outing from this defense all year long.
The Patriots are not a horrible defense. The Patriots had a good defense. The Bills lit them on fire in that playoff game and scored 7 touchdowns. They didn't all of a sudden become a trash defense.
Correct.
That was terrible. The Bills played an amazing game on the same day that the Patriots played a bad game, and that can happen. But I think people take that and stretch that into the Bills made mistakes and played poorly against the Chiefs on a day.
And the coaches didn't help them.
Patrick Mahomes was killing it and playing an amazing game. If we get the Patrick Mahomes that played against Cincinnati, the Bills win 10 out of 10.
Sure.
Not 5-5. If they get that Patrick Mahomes that played against Cincinnati, the Bills win 10 out of 10 of those games. We didn't. We got the immortal Patrick Mahomes, who was playing out of his mind, amazing. And that can happen because he's awesome, just like Josh Allen has done to teams that were better than what he made them look like. He was just playing, Bill Belichick didn't become a joke of a defensive coach. It's not that all of a sudden, he's an idiot and doesn't know how to coach defense because Josh Allen played out of his mind in back-to-back games. And for the first time in his career, didn't have a team punt against him. He didn't become stupid all of a sudden. It was just, he went up against a buzzsaw that day, and that happens.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough league. And so I guess that's sort of where I want to cap off this season in review is this was a really good football team. This is still a really good football team. They're going to lose some pieces. We need to bring some pieces on. I'd like to see them get aggressive. I'd like to see, I think that I put out a tweet the other day, Greg.
Make a splash trade.
Yeah. Like we've been saying a lot on this show that the Super Bowl window's open as long as Josh Allen's wearing a Bills uniform. I 100% believe that. But just like all things, those are on spectrums, right? Like the window's sometimes going to be a little bit open, like it is on a 50-degree, April day.
We've seen those seasons in Green Bay and in Seattle.
Absolutely.
That hey,
you have a
chance.
Kind of
messed it up, and if Russell Wilson plays out of his mind, maybe you can. But they messed around a little too much.
Yes, but right now I think the window's wide open. I think they have enough young guys that are cost controlled enough. Brandon Beane has put this roster in a good enough situation where I think they could get aggressive. Right now would be a time to get aggressive, where maybe in 3 to 4 years, you got to swallow a little bit of medicine because you got overly aggressive. But if it works out and you win a Super Bowl, no one's going to care. There isn't a person in the world that's going to care if you have to have 2 years where the Super Bowl window's a little bit shut, a little bit tight, a little bit tighter. So I do hope they get aggressive, but this isn't some bad team that needs some magic thing to come in and make them a Super Bowl contender. Even if they don't get super aggressive and make any big time moves, this is going to be when the Vegas bets come out for next year, they're going to be at that top of that Super Bowl. The odds to win the Super Bowl, one of the best teams to win the AFC. Like, this is a very good football team who just had a really bad ending to the season. And it was still a close game. They had the game won. And so we just have to have a little bit of perspective of where this team was, what they've been through, who they've got in place. And if they can make a big splash move and open that window even further, fantastic. But right now, as bad as that felt and as long as that's taken me to get over, man, I'm still real excited and feeling very good about this team's opportunity in the next 2 to 3 years.
So speaking of that excitement and ready to turn the page and ready to go on to more exciting things looking forward, we promise we are not going to continue to rehash the past. We are ready to move on. And the first step in moving on is now evaluating where do we stand from a salary cap's perspective. So this Friday night, I will be taking the lead from our man Aaron Quinn, who set up and hosted our fun playoff extravaganzas. We are going to be hosting a Cover One salary cap spectacular on Friday night at 8:00. We will be going through every single player on the Buffalo Bills roster, what their current contract is. Would we keep them? Can we extend them? Can we give them a pay cut? Can we release them? Can we trade them? And see how much reasonable salary cap space we can create to go into this offseason and to get this roster set up before we go into free agency. I'll be joined by Anthony Prohaska, Anthony Romeo, David Fox, and our man Steve Mathis are going to be jumping in. Aaron might step in and say hi. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I got to check with the wife on that. I forgot. All right.
But we will be getting everything together and going through that on Friday night. I will be playing the role of Brandon Beane. The guys will be presenting to me their proposals of what we do with every single player on the roster, every single pending free agent, and we'll keep a running tally as the night goes of how much salary cap space we've created and what openings we may create by releasing some players, how many roster spots we have there. So should be a really fun exercise. It'll be something really valuable for you all the way up until March 14th when the new league year starts. So that will be Friday night at 8:00 Eastern time. We'll have the announcements out for that tomorrow and Friday. Make sure you keep an eye out for that, but should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. It should be a really good exercise with the guys.
Yeah, you know what I like about that, Greg, is we were talking about this again a little bit offline earlier. Everyone jumps right into the draft, and I like the draft. You like the draft. A little bit of this process of going through the draft and doing these mock drafts now, like a lot of this doesn't mean anything until we get through the free agent period. And what we know about Brandon Beane and how he attacks this roster building is, even though they don't have a ton of money, we did hear Joe Shane say something about, the Bills have some money. He was jumping into free agency before he took the job in New York, alluding to that maybe they had more money or ways to get more money out of what they had, and we're going to attack free agency. We know Brandon Beane wants to address as many of the holes and perceived needs in free agency before he heads into the draft so they can really work off of his board. We know that's what he wants to do. And so I think this is a great exercise to guide us fans, all of these content creators through how much money's really possibly out there. Where will this roster look like? What holes will exist to get to that number? And then we can take that and say, what can we do here going forward? Because free agency does come before the draft. We've got a long way before we get to the draft. And the guys that you bring in free agency are going to lay the foundation for how this roster looks going into next year. You can't always bank on draft picks to come in and have immediate impact. Greg Rousseau had a nice addition to this team, but it wasn't consistent all year long. He hit a rookie wall. Boogie Basham didn't really make an impact on this team this year. Like, you're not going to bank on 7 dudes coming in as draft picks and making an impact. So a lot of that impact is going to come from Brandon Beane and all these guys find that thrift store
development of those guys we talked about, but correct, also outside additions. And so I'm really excited that you're doing this show because it's going to lay a good foundation, because I have a free agent wish list going on. I like it.
That
I got a sneak preview of it. It's nice.
Yeah. But I don't know, I see the salary cap number on Spot Track, but I don't know, is that really the salary cap number, or I know Brandon Beane's probably going to rework some things. So I'm excited to see how you and the guys, and maybe if I jump in there, how we rework some things and what that final number ends up as. So then I can go do my shopping.
Yeah. And I promise you, we're going to end up with a bigger number than Brandon Beane ends up with, but I will help describe that as we go, that we're probably going to maximize the highest possibility of that number.
Sure.
And then I'll let you know, hey, here's the range of what I expect to be able to do with that number.
Right.
All right. Well, we appreciate it very much, guys. The chat was awesome tonight. We really appreciate you guys checking us out. We're going to be here for you all off season long. We're going to do the Salary Cap Spectacular on Friday night. Then Aaron and I will get into some of our wish lists for those free agents. We will do plenty of draft work for everybody, but we're going to focus a little bit on the team right now, who we can add, who we can retain, how we can do that. We'll start each show with any news that's happened over the past week since our last show. Then we'll have lots of really good guys on to be able to get us ready for draft time. You guys heard a little bit from Russell Brown. We're going to have him on for even more work to get some things ready. It's going to be a great offseason. We're going to be there for you all season long. Very, very exciting. Make sure you're checking out everybody else. The guys are doing a great job across the network. Awesome. The guys with the Roundup, Air Raid Hour, the Film Room, Disguise Coverage, the Hoof. Just so many great things going on. Make sure you're checking everybody out to check out all their work. Aaron, what are your final thoughts for the people before we wish them adieu?
Yeah, that's it. I think it's time to get past that Kansas City loss, move on. This is an exciting team. It's an exciting time. I think, like you said, there's going to be some money available for some free agent moves, and then the draft is going to be fun too. And I can't wait to get into this process. And it helps this time of year where I'm stuck up in the Northeast. I know not everybody that's here. It's gray out. It's still cold. This kind of off-season minutia, getting into the draft, getting into free agencies helps me to pass the time, because before we know it, it'll be spring and it'll be OTAs again. And then it's like, I can put my flag back up and start getting ready for football all again. So join us, be with us here. Let's get over that loss and get excited and ramp up for the next season.
We appreciate it very much, guys. Thank you for checking us out. Always having a good time. But on behalf of Aaron Quinn, I'm Greg Thompson. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are